Bay chairs. And welcome to our first PFA networking meeting. And tonight we're talking about teen driving. And we have three wonderful speakers. We have Marie Trant from the Lewis School of Driving. We have Officer George Caponara from the New Canaan Police Department. And we have Scott Cluett from the insurance firm Brown, Thayer, and Shedd. So we are going to have Marie speak first.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Is it okay if I take this off of here and walk around? Is that okay? Oh, yeah, I can hear it. I could hear that myself. Well, my name is Marie Trant, and I do own the Lewis School of Driving. Some of you might have already had older children come through the driving school, but just want to try and address who I have here tonight and any concerns, information, give you first. And certainly I can wait till everybody speaks. I will stick around the whole evening and can answer any questions you might have after, because obviously this is a big time in all of your lives. But just to introduce a little bit more about me, I did not grow up dying to be the owner of a driving school. I actually grew up in Ireland and emigrated here. Mr. Lewis taught me to drive. And Mr. Lewis, for those of you that aren't from town for the longest of time, was a police officer here in New Canaan. And he taught pedestrian safety for the longest time, actually. He retired in 1970s and started Lewis School of Driving. So we've been around nearly 50 years in town. And we've been in town in a different location. We used to be on Main Street over Salon Kiklo in that really fabulous looking building. Way back when I started with Mr. Lewis in 1990, it was a bit of a dump of a building. And now we're over on Cross Street on the other side of town. So I ended up becoming involved with the driving school, long story, but he became my stepfather and he became ill and I took over the business in 1990. He got better, so he came back, but he passed away in 2006. So the business is mine. I've been doing it since 1990, so 29 years now. And I love my business, and I love the fact that we're a family business and that you guys support us so much. Thank you. And we have amazing staff, and they've been with me for years, so we have great experience on board to handle pretty much anything that's ever thrown at us. So I wanted to go over a few basic stuff about driver's ed and not get too deep into it because some of you maybe already have a permit, some of you don't. So I just want to address basics and then I'll give you a few other things at the end. And as I said, I'll stick around and answer any questions after the evening's over. Okay? So first of all, I have 4 kids myself. I actually have 3 grandkids now and a 4th one on the way. So I've taught them all to drive. So I understand what's going on in your lives right now and how stressful it certainly can be because it's one thing me teaching a student to drive, next thing having me have my kid who had a lousy, first quarter teaching them to drive and wanting to really have a conversation with them one-on-one in the car with them about how poorly they're doing in school. But my focus is teaching them to drive. So I shouldn't do that when I'm teaching them to drive because now you have a pretty ticked off, nervous driver driving you around. And that's not the goal that we want to have when you're teaching, right? So permit-wise, the very first step of you getting to be able to drive the car yourselves is to get a permit. Do you have one yet? Okay. Anybody here have one? A permit yet? You have one. Oh, so the majority don't have permits. Okay, that's pretty unique. Oftentimes I'm splattered with everybody. So when did you get your permit? Nice. So you've had it a while. The permit test, I'm just going to tell you, every teen sitting here, study that driver's manual that I brought. The writing in it is teeny tiny if you guys looked at it, but your eyes are pretty decent. You cannot just study the app. If you just study the app, you're going to go to the DMV and fail your permit test. You need to read the book, okay? Yes, it's boring, but it's what you need to do. You guys are good at cramming stuff in, read through it, but use the app as well. It's a great tool. It's on the DMV website, and it gives you questions to help prepare you to take the permit test. It's a 25-question test, right? You can get a couple wrong and still be okay. And then once you get the permit, you get a paper permit, and then they mail you a plastic one. That permit then allows you to drive with anybody who's had a license for 4 years or more that hasn't been suspended. And it allows you to get a license after you've had the permit 4 months or 6 months, depending on what course you decide to take. And again, give you all sorts of information on that if you need. But once you get that permit in hand, that's the time that you can physically get behind the wheel, right? But if you don't have a permit, you can start driver's ed even though you don't have a permit. You just have to be 16. So you can't do anything till you turn 16, right? However, every single one of you in this room have already been learning how to drive, teens, because you've been watching mom and dad, right, from the back seat. Oh yeah, yes they have, right? Except for probably the last 3 or 4 years. When do you all get phones? When do you get a phone? How old are you these days? 13, 12, 2? No joke. So my grandson's 21 months, and they banned him till he's 2 years old for any, video stuff on TV and stuff like that. And they've been very good about it, and it's actually worked out pretty okay. But he gets my phone. He knows how to swipe it. He's been watching us do it. He knows what to do. But you're right. So you guys have had a cell phone for the last 3 years of your life anyway. So every time you're in the car with mom and dad as a passenger, just maybe coming even here tonight, you're in your phone like this. God forbid there should be a conversation, right? But more importantly, what you've missed is looking around at the whole world you're going to be involved in now for the next, God knows, years of your life, right? You need to put the phone down, even if you don't have a permit, even if you're not driving. Involve yourself in your parents' driving. That doesn't mean critiquing them, but it means, oh my gosh, look at this intersection. Who gets to go first? Those lights are so bright. What do I do? Oh my gosh, this. You can learn just as a passenger. So this time, and no harm, no foul, nobody's stressed, right? So that's tip number 1, do that. It is so powerful, right? There's many other tips in there, but that's a big one, right? So once you get your permit, you're going to learn to drive. There are many, back there I handed out all these sheets, and there's a ton of different ones about various aspects of driving. This little one is about the process. Again, I'm not going to just hand what, you can read it. And if you have any questions, ask me. I will tell you, if you've never been to the DMV for a permit, there is a side door entrance to go into. Pretty nice process now, right? Yeah. Much better than going in the main door, getting caught up with all that crazy stuff. There's a special door for permit tests, okay? Do not forget your Social Security card. The number is not good enough. You need the card. All right, there's a lot of details, so ask me about that. I will gladly tell you. And then also on here, there's a little tip for you parents, just how to get going on it, right? You're not going to jump right onto Grist Mill and hop on the 95 right after they get their permit. Start slow, right? And that's what that sheet is about. And then there's one here about what to know and what to expect. Again, just common questions I know you guys will have in the process. So important. Some danger zones. And then there's one there that at the very top, when do you know your teen is ready to get a license to drive on their own? All right? I will tell you, one of the biggest questions I have from parents coming up to a road test for any of you teens is, I'm not sure if they're ready. Well, first of all, that's what you're paying me to do too, is to assess, okay? So I can certainly give you feedback, but I might give feedback and say, ooh, they're not ready. And you're like, could you tell them? And I'm like, of course. I could easily tell them, and it usually gets received much better. If you feel they're not ready, they're probably not ready. Listen to your gut, parents. And the key to being safe driving, so you have your permit, is so many hours behind the wheel. State minimum, I put you on the spot. Do you know what it is? Nice. State minimum is 40. So it's only 40 hours, and we expect them to drive out there with everybody else out there. You've seen everybody else out there, right? This is not good. 40 hours is not even close. It's a minimum. Why would you want minimums at this point? This is a weapon that you're driving around, potentially. You want to have it really, the average it takes for most new drivers to experience what we need them to see out there is 60 to 100 hours, right? And I know you guys are like, she has no clue what my life is like. There's no way I'm going to get that many hours in with this kid. All right, get the minimum 40, but make sure when they're a passenger in your seat, put that phone in the glove box and pay attention to what's going on out here. This is what's going on out here, and this is what we need to pay attention to. It's not you driving the car. I know you're going to learn to drive that car within 10 hours. You'll figure out the gas, the brake. Do you have your license already? No. So you'll figure that out, right? But what you can't figure out is everybody in this room, if we all leave here today, you can't predict what I'm going to do if I'm a crappy driver, lousy driver, if I'm a great driver, if I'm a cautious driver. And that's what driving's about. So that's why you guys need all those hours. You need so many more hours, right? How many hours do you think you've gotten yet? 10? 20? Right, which is pretty awesome. And that's just June, right? So your permit is good for 2 years. So when you get your permit, you have up to 2 years to get your license, right? What happens if you go beyond 2 years? Any clue? Yeah, ugh, right? You have to retake the permit test. So parents, maybe they're going for 4 months to get their license, but you have 2 years. You don't have to do it within 4 months. Nothing falls apart, right? So once you've had all the proper road hours, all the proper class hours, and parents, you do attend a class with your parent, with your teen. It's a parent class. And if you've done it before, you've got to do it again. And it's just part of the curriculum mandated by the state. And once you've done all of that, then you're eligible to get a license, okay? And once you get a license in the state of Connecticut, you do have restrictions on you, right? You have restrictions that I'm going to probably let you go over because I think that's what you are in your wheelhouse of there, right? But the restrictions are very specific, and they're specific to keep every single one of you guys safe. That's what it's about. It's not to be punitive. It's not to be, controlling you. It's that we know, the state knows, the traffic safety knows what things make you vulnerable. It is the number one killer of your age group are traffic accidents. The number one killer. Something avoidable. I'm not telling you it's uncurable disease. It's an avoidable death as long as you take the time to train properly, okay? So once you get your license, you have insurance on your car, which we will get addressed later, and you guys can find out the pricing on that and the limitations and the suggestions, right? Very important. When you're out there instructing parents, one of the fears you have is this kid is in control of this car. Oh my goodness, right? Mom is worried that you might mix up the gas and brake pedal. Mom is worried that you might not hit the brakes at the proper stop sign, right? Dad is worried that perhaps you're not going to be in the right intersection and take the left in front of an oncoming vehicle. So they're all the things you can learn as a passenger, but parents, you have some tools. I know you'd like my brake, probably that I have installed on my driving school cars. There's a brake there. But I will tell you, for most of my teaching, I very seldom use the brake. I use communication with the teens, right? So, but you do have tools. You can use your rear view mirror or visor, flip it down, and there's a mirror on it. Parents, use it as your rear view mirror. It's extra visibility for you to understand what's going on around here, right? Use your side mirror too. A lot of you think, well, what am I going to do if there's an accident? What do I do if they hit the gas instead of the brake? Anybody have a plan? You don't have my brake. Any teen have a plan? So you're going out with your kids driving and you have no plan. This is not smart, right? So a plan would be install one of my brakes, but that's probably a little extreme. Some of you might have a handbrake in the middle of your vehicle, emergency brake. Who does in the car they drive? It's very rare. You guys do, you do. The Corollas do. We use Corollas. So in an extreme emergency, if you used that and slammed it on, do you know what would happen to the car? Any guess? Yeah, and it would 360. Do a nice little donut for you because it's attached to the, right? Exactly. So he knows that's not the best line of defense. It's a line of defense if you have it, which the two of you do, but you have to pump the brake. Like the old school pumping brakes before ABS, you have to pump the brake to get the car to come to a stop because you have to keep ahead of the skid. But another tool, which I just want all of you to have is in your back pocket, I hope you never have to use it, but if you're in that situation, is you can shift it into neutral, okay? You can all do that. Not park, but neutral. It's like pedaling a bike. If you're pedaling, you're going, but if you're take your feet off the pedals, you're gonna stop eventually. It'll slow the car down. It's not the greatest load on the engine, but in a panic situation, at least you have something that you can refer to in your back pocket to pull out and use, okay? So you want to have tools. You want to have guidelines. You want to have, okay, we're going out on a driving lesson today. Today, I think we're going to go, let's head over to Hoyt Street, then we're going to go down to 123. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe you're not ready for 123 yet. And so tell your teens what you're thinking of doing that day so they have a plan, right? And then you're going to go through all of this. You want them to drive in the rain. We have people that call for driving lessons that have been scheduled, like today. I don't want to go out driving. It's raining. You're driving. We'll teach you. If you're really that nervous, we won't. But you've got to learn to drive in all weather. A lot of people getting a license now. You're actually in a good position because you're between the two, unless you're licensing in October. You're going to drive at night more. Up until this point, a lot of you haven't driven at night a lot because it's been beautiful and bright out. Now it's dark earlier and earlier, so you'll have more opportunity. That's good. You need to drive at night. You need to drive in rain. You will be driving in sleet and snow. Wet leaves at this time of year are very dangerous, right? You need to increase following distance. All of this information is what driving's about. Not figuring the car out just, okay? And that's the importance of the time behind the wheel. So signing up for driver's ed. So you have two choices to get a license in Connecticut. One is through the full driver's ed course, 30 hours of class and 8 hours of driving. I didn't bring my whole curriculum stuff, and it's all on my website. And again, if you have questions, I'll answer them for you. But basically, it's 30 class hours and 8 hours of driving is the full course. And 2 hours of the class a parent attends, right? So the classes are at my office in New Canaan. We actually just opened up another one in Wilton at the high school, just not an office, but a classroom. And every student just comes to class whenever they can get there. We teach them sequentially, but they don't have to attend sequentially. So then you tick down, get your 15 classes. You can do driving hours simultaneously. We pick you up at the house, at home. And we have specific lessons. So like you're on lesson 3, well, today we're going to learn back-end parking, okay? And then each lesson is different, progressing, right? And that allows you to get your license if you've had your permit for 4 months. Can't hold up my fourth finger, but 4 months. 120 days from the date of issue of your permit. If you choose to go a different route, say you don't have time to do those classes, you guys are so scheduled and so booked with, even in the summer, you can then do the shortened course, which is 8 hours of class, right? And you can do as many driving hours as you want, 2 to 8 or more. And that you have to wait 6 months to get your license. But then you are a parent are saying you're doing the book work at home with them, okay? So there's just 2 different ways to do it, 2 different paths, both get you a license. And I can go into that at further detail if you have any questions, of course, and it's on our website. Starting driving, when you're first getting your kid in the car, check a few things. Where are their feet? Check that they're not using 2 feet. A lot of them love to use 2 feet for driving. Their left foot on the brake, their right foot on the gas. How would they know not to do that? They're not staring at your feet. They don't know. It makes sort of sense, right? 2 pedals, 2 feet, that's good. And you got to show them and teach them and understand that that's not the right way, and you've got to watch. Anybody learning stick shift? Any teen? You can drive stick. What adult can drive stick in here? There's probably not a majority, but there's about half, about. How about my back table? Both, yeah, I would hope so. We got a stick shift car last year, actually, and we're teaching stick shift, but we're only teaching it to people who already have a license. And it's amazing how many people don't know how to drive stick. I have 4 kids, none of mine do, shamefully enough. One started a little bit on it, and he just hasn't had the time to take more lessons, but it's a good tool to use, especially in snow. It makes you more aware of the vehicle and what to do. But we teach on automatics, so it's not too pressing. So once you're in the car, you're trying to get them to be safe, but you're also trying to get them to be calm. So one of the suggestions I have is that when you're talking to them, that you try to not be so, like for example, you're coming up to a stop sign and they just sort of roll it a little bit, right? Ticketable offense, FYI, and then you go through it. Our reaction as parents are, what the heck you doing? You just blah, 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 right? And to jump on them. Instead, maybe turn it around a little bit and say, so how do you think you handle that intersection back there? What are your thoughts? There might be, I was awesome. Did it perfect. And of course, you could expand the conversation a little better. Well, it might be better next time if you came to a complete stop. So that's going to change the environment in the car for your teaching, which is very powerful because it is tough because we as parents do want to tell you what you're doing wrong. So it's tough to break that tradition. So once you have your license, you are licensed to drive. Parents, they are licensed to drive. I have many parents who will say, well, I'm not going to let them drive once they get their license. If they have a license, they're licensed to drive. It might not be your car, but they might drive somebody else's car. Maybe against your wishes, but it's still, they have a license. So unless you're ready, parents, to say, here's your license, and I've done everything I can to make you safe, don't do it. Wait until you're at that point, okay? And in a nutshell, that's it. I could go on for hours, but obviously we don't want to keep you here all night. The basic tools that you can do right now, parents, is teach your kids right now. Tell them to put the phone in the glove box for 10 minutes, even going home tonight. Pay attention to what's going on outside you. You guys have shut down from that in the last 3 years. And you need to be aware of that world that you're going to be part of. And it's important. It'll make you a better driver. Okay? We do questions, I guess, at the end. Is that better? Yeah, right? And I'll stick around. All right, thank you. Thanks so much. Do you want it up here? Oh, you're going next. You want to walk around or you're going to stand? Walk and talk? You can do it. Chew gum?
Hello, good evening. Scott Cluitt from Brown Thiershed Insurance in New Canaan. Some of you know our agency, and many of you may know Tim Brown, who has given this chat every year for I don't know how many years. I did it once 4 years ago. He escaped from town a few days ago, and so I grabbed his notes, and here we go. Marie, you said a couple of things that really hit home with me. One is I learned early on that I was not destined to be a driving instructor. And I learned that when I was trying to teach my wife of 1 year how to drive a Volkswagen Beetle. I won't tell you what year that was. And she went to my father and said, I may be married to him, but he's not going to teach me how to drive this car, will you? And Dad said, sure. And they got into the Beetle with a stick shift and all, and off they went. And to this day, she hates stick shift, but she knows how to drive one. Another thing you mentioned was four-way intersections. You probably know of a four-way stop that I seem to go through more than any other, which is on 106 and Belden Hill and Wolf Pit Road in Wilton. Whenever I get to that stop, invariably there are 4 or 5 cars coming from each direction, and no one really knows when to go. I don't think anyone really understands the right-of-way and the yield process and so on. Anyway, that hit home as well. And then you talk about leaves and snow and rain, and I'll touch on that in a second. I just want to touch on a few insurance topics. Insurance itself, what it is, what it does, the increased cost that parents can expect to see once a teen begins to drive, and a bit about accidents that we hear about, unfortunately, every day. Permitted drivers are not going to increase your insurance, but they are fully covered by insurance until you get licensed. But you should tell your agent or your insurance company that my son or daughter now has a permit, and at that point the company will make note of it. As I said, no increased cost, but they will be alerted to the fact that you have a new driver, and at some point we'll expect to hear from you that your teen has become licensed. Auto insurance basically provides, as you all know, I'm sure, parents anyway, protection against financial loss due to or resulting from accidents. Vehicle liability or vehicle insurance has 2 components, liability and physical damage. Liability consists of bodily injury and property damage to others, and physical damage is what's called comprehensive and collision, which are coverages afforded damage to your vehicle. The state mandates that every registered motor vehicle be insured. The state minimum limits are not, we feel, sufficient. So you need to talk to your insurance company and see what higher limits are recommended. Without getting into the numbers and complicating things, take reasonably high limits and then also purchase an umbrella. And I'm not talking about what you might have brought here tonight. Do parents have umbrellas? Know what an umbrella is or does? It's simply high limit liability insurance in multiples of $1 million, which comes into play once the automobile liability limits are exhausted. It's not too hard in a serious automobile accident to blow through your entire liability insurance limit in a short period of time. Medical expenses, hospital stays, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry about the feedback. I don't know where that's coming from. Okay. Another thing to remember, is this still working? Can you hear it? is that insurance follows the vehicle and not the driver. So whatever vehicle you are driving, it is the vehicle owner's insurance that's going to cover you for the duration of that trip. Some little tidbits of advice as we go along would be never lend your car or give your keys to anyone. And I just make that a practice, and I always have. No one drives my car outside of my family. Once you surrender that car to a friend or anyone else, you are basically permitting him or her to drive the car, but it's your insurance that is in force and going to cover if anything happens, whether it's an accident or theft or whatever. It's called permissive use. So when you hand over the keys to your car, you are permitting that person full use of your car under your insurance. Your insurance, therefore, is at risk, as we call it, for as long as you're not in control of your car. Rates. Parents will see increased rates when teens get licensed, and it's just unavoidable. It's a fact of life. Boys' rates are higher than girls. They tell us that that's because we take greater risks than they do. We speed and they don't. That's what we're being told. And those additional risks that they take on are being used to set the rates. Discounts. There are 2 or 3 discounts which are available to people. Driver's ed, which is expected now by every insurance company. They just expect that every driver will have had driver's ed. And there is a discount for it. If you are on the honor roll with a grade of 80 or better, or a B average or better, there is something called a good student credit. All of these credits serve to reduce your cost of insurance. The third one is if you're in boarding school and you are more than 100 miles from home without a car, there is another credit for that as well. Needless to say, tickets and accidents have a huge effect on insurance. We've actually seen insurance double and triple when people have accidents or get tickets. And now there seem to be tickets for just about everything. Cell phones, well, you name it. Distracted driving in one form or another. But they do have an effect. Let's see. A couple of cautions. Another one, talk about the 4-way stops, but you know, when you're on an on-ramp, for example, the Merritt Parkway, and you've got a car ahead of you, and you're waiting, that car's waiting to merge into traffic, and you're waiting behind that car wondering when he's going to go, when he's going to take his life in his hands or her hands and go for it. The problem is that when that driver starts, oftentimes they will stop suddenly, and you are looking back to see where you can next get into the line of traffic. And we see this time and again. And you've probably seen 2 or 3 people pulled over at an entrance ramp to a interstate or the Merritt. And it's because they've had a little bumper, and it's probably that situation. The first person panics, stops suddenly, and you don't see them, and you've made contact. Distracted driving, there's enough said about that, but there are plenty of distractions when we drive every day. I mean, it could be cell phone, it could be radio, food, beverage, pet, friends who should not be in your car early on. There are a million distractions, and they're not all within the car. They're on the outside as well. And I found myself momentarily glancing at something right or left, And in a millisecond, I've turned back and I've begun to wander within the lane, in one direction or another. So it's just, can't overemphasize the need for attentive driving and paying attention and being aware of what's going on in your car and around you. Road and weather conditions. We have 3 boys. I took them when they were learning to drive before we didn't have learner's permits in our day. So before they went for their test or did any studying really, we'd play around in a parking lot. And I would take them to a snow-covered lot and let them get into a skid and try to teach them how to recover. It's quite an experience if you haven't been in a car that's spinning or out of control, trying to figure out, what do I do to stop this before it just goes on and on and on. So that's one thing. And another, as you mentioned, Marie, are leaves. Wet leaves are like ice. And you've probably all had an experience, the parents anyway, stepping on the brakes and feeling the car lose traction because the wet leaves are beneath. Accidents. If you, let me just see what he's got here. If you get in an accident, it's easy to say, don't panic. I was hit by an oncoming car in Darien about 6 or 7 years ago. It's a shattering experience, and yet there was very little damage to the car, and I wasn't injured. But once you get your wits about you, you need to think about a few things. One is to call the police and let them know if there are any injuries or fire at the accident scene. Next, get all the information you can. Whether you're at fault or another driver's at fault, get all the information you can from witnesses, other drivers, or anyone in the area. It will stand you in good stead when it comes to filing a claim with your insurance. If you don't have a witness or the police are not at the accident scene, it's going to be, when it gets to insurance settlements, it's going to be your word against the other driver. And how many times have we heard the other driver change his or her story from having been at fault at the scene to having reported to his or her insurance company, who then comes back to our insurance company, and says, that isn't the way it happened at all. Our insured stated that you backed into her, or you hit her in the rear. So, important to document. Use your cell phone, take pictures of cars at the scene, and do the best you can to gather as much evidence as possible. Once in a while, people allow themselves to be talked out of calling the police. The police report is very important when it comes to settling insurance claims, because the insurance adjusters all go by the narrative in the report. And it's the only way you have, if you're not at fault, of making sure that that message gets to the insurance company. Put your agent's or company's telephone number in your cell, and so you will have that available if you need it. Remember about bad things happening at night. As Marie said, check all of your equipment before you go out. Do a walk around of the car. Make sure all the lights are working. Wipers, as if you were just doing a safety check. Headlights, taillights, signals, marker lights, etc. And be sure to dim your headlights at night. There are an awful lot of cars these days who seem to have one headlight out, more than I can ever remember seeing, which is a hazard for everybody as well. Drinking and driving, don't really need to get into that. An at-fault auto accident involving liquor is a surefire way to get your insurance canceled, and then it's going to be a problem replacing it. Tim Brown personally had 3 sobering experiences that he talks about. And I'll just cover them quickly and indicate why each happened. One was in '72. He was in a Mustang. I'm not sure how old he was at that point. I think he was 18. He'd had something to drink, so he let his best friend drive the car. And coming down Smith Ridge in the area of the field club, or a little bit above, they were speeding, and the driver lost control of the car, and it hit a pole, and then went several hundred yards, he told me, and wound up in a tree, not in a tree, wrapped around a tree, to use that expression. And they both walked away with minor scratches. So they got lucky, but the message was speed and alcohol in that case. Another friend of his skidded on leaves on Lower Weed Street and was not wearing a seatbelt. He hit 2 trees and unfortunately passed away 4 days later. Not speeding, no alcohol involved, but he hit these leaves and just completely lost control of the car. And he was a friend of Tim's. And the third person was his own brother-in-law, who was approaching that 90-degree bend in Oak at the Historical Society coming towards town. And it was a very foggy night, and he made it most of the way around and then hit a tree. And he was killed instantly. But that was a visibility situation. And I remember that one myself because I was a volunteer firefighter at the time and was at that scene. So be careful out there. There are lots of opportunities, but you're gonna have a great career ahead of you, and it's a lot of fun. And once you get it down, and everybody does, sooner or later, it'll be fine. So just remember that driving is a privilege and not a right. So good luck to you all.
All right. Evening, everyone. Am I coming across clearly? Okay, great. My name is Officer George Caponera. I've been with the New Canaan Police Department for just around 10 years now. As a patrol officer in uniform, how you see me, I'm obviously the person who responds to 911 calls. I'm the person who you'll see stopping cars. I work 2 shifts primarily. That's the 7 to 3 day shift and the 3 to 11 shift. So my schedule splits halfway through the week. So obviously tonight I work 3 to 11. So I kind of have my fair share of traffic incidents, from early morning speeders, late afternoon texters, and then of course early evening, as unfortunately usually we get like a lot of serious accidents. So I want to kind of go over to some of the safety rules involving driving, especially for new permit drivers, new licensed drivers, along with just some facts related to and laws related to driving, and also kind of dispel some of the myths out there. So one of the first ones I always like to go over with everyone is some states, I'm sure you've all heard of it. New York City, for example, has a quota for police for how many tickets they have to hand out a month. Just to say to police, how much are you doing your job effectively? New York City has a 3-ticket quota per officer on patrol. So you're out 5 days a week for 30 days. You have to find 3 violations, which you could do in 5 minutes in New Canaan, probably 30 seconds in Manhattan. What is the state quota for Connecticut? Anyone know? For police officers? Any guesses? Shout them out. 0. We have a law in the state of Connecticut. No department can ask an officer to write a ticket, with the exception of a serious motor vehicle accident. We keep stats on everything in New Canaan Police Department. How many animal calls we have, how many rabies calls involving animal calls we have, how many dog roaming calls, how many raccoon calls. That's just animal. I mean, we have so many subcategories, and we have stats on everything. We do an annual report. We have everything from traffic accidents, fatalities, traffic accidents involving just property damage, how many stops we do a year, how many how many DUIs, drug offenses, everything. The only thing we do not keep a stat on in the New Canaan Police Department, is how many tickets we write. Supervisor can't grade you on it, can't evaluate you on your yearly performance eval, and we don't keep stats on it. I have no idea how many we write because there's no category for it for the annual report. All the money also, a lot of people believe, goes to fund the town or fund the department, buy us new cool cars or anything else like that. Man, our cars are so old and junky, but whatever. No, you'll see a ticket if you ever get one, right? God forbid. The ticket says Hartford, Connecticut. All the money goes to the state of Connecticut general fund in Hartford. When I write a ticket to someone in New Canaan, the money does not go to the New Canaan Town Hall, does not go to the New Canaan Police Department. It goes upstate to Hartford, to a city I've been to like 8 times in my life. And it goes into the state general fund that they can use however they see fit. But it does not go to us. The reason why we write tickets, so therefore, is not for money. It's not to fulfill a quota. It's simply to correct the bad driving behavior we've seen. Some days I might write 2 or 3. Some days I might go 2 or 3 days in a row, stop 8 cars, 8 very friendly, apologetic people. The violations weren't too bad, and I give them a warning. You know, people I never met before, and I chose, you know what, I didn't write any tickets today. It's not a big deal. I think I got my point across to them, and they seem to be somewhat understanding of the consequence of their driving behavior. So we don't write them for money. We don't write them for vengeance. We don't have a quota. We only write them to correct bad behavior. So that's one of the big things that people believe, that there's a quota. The other big thing is that there are cameras watching your every move at all the traffic intersections throughout the state. Another law passed in Connecticut is to prevent that. There are traffic cameras, but they only play in real time to highway department authorities in Meriden. So they can see if there's an issue on the highway, maybe a truck rollover on 95. So they don't have to try to get someone there to see it. You can just look up the traffic camera, I-95 corridor, mile marker 25 in Stamford. Yep, we got a rollover. Send everything. But they do not record, and it cannot be used for law enforcement purposes. So we can't write a ticket based off of them. So a lot of those myths are out there. I'm not trying to put fear into you guys tonight. I'm not trying to trick anyone. We don't have it. Connecticut prevents it. New York does. New York allows it, especially in New York City. You can go through a light in New York City. If you're ever in New York City and you run a red light in certain areas, next thing you know, a week later, you're going to get a ticket in the mail. It's a civil fine only because they don't know who was driving, so they just charge the owner. It's usually $100 or so, but there's no points in your license because they don't know who the driver was. If you don't pay it, they revoke your registration, so you can't now legally drive the car. But Connecticut does not have that. Some things important to understand, Scott, they've kind of stepped on this already, but driving is a privilege in the state of Connecticut, not a right. Anybody know First Amendment? Right to what? Free speech, free press, those are rights. So when someone yells at someone on the road, you cut me off, you SOB, and then the person comes in to file a complaint against that guy, I tell them I'm so sorry, but I can't do anything. I got the plate. I can't, it's free speech. They're allowed to yell at you. I can't do anything about that. But driving, if I see erratic operation and I want to stop you and hold you for a little while, I'm allowed to do that. Because driving is not guaranteed in the Constitution. It's not guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. The day you turn 21 in the state of Connecticut, you can carry a firearm without any training. As a police officer, it took me 7 months of training before I was issued mine. But I'm held to a higher standard. You don't need training at all, or any type of, because it's the Second Amendment right. But there is nothing about the driving in the Constitution, so so you have a lot more restrictions. Police can detain you, hold you, pull you out of the car without a warrant, without probable cause. They can do that. They can't do that at your house because you're protected in your house, but they can do it in a mobile moving vehicle. Okay? So police have a lot more power over the roads, especially because the roads are funded by state tax dollars. So no one owns the roads. The government owns the roads, and the government has decided to cede all authority to the police to enforce the laws they've put out there. Anybody have an idea how many traffic laws there are in the state of Connecticut? How many separate, distinct laws there are? 100, 1,000, anybody want to guess? 400, okay? 400 laws. So I promise you, when I walk up to the vehicle and I introduce myself and you say, why have I been stopped? I have a reason, and I'm going to tell you. I have one of 400 reasons to pick from. So trust me, it's out there. It's pretty easy to follow a car for 30 seconds and see that they have a marker light out, lighting up the license plate, or they just touched the yellow center line, or they went 1 mile over the speed limit on my moving radar. 1 mile is speeding. Doesn't mean we're going to write you a ticket. I've never seen it happen. But is it legal to stop you and talk to you? Sure. Again, I kind of touched on this, but there are many exceptions to the search warrant law, and they almost all apply to cars. You need a search warrant to enter someone's house, minus exigent circumstances, such as you see someone being attacked. You don't need to get permission to go in. But when it comes to a car, you can pull the person out and search for various reasons without a search warrant. And every time someone says, you're violating me, I'm recording you, got my camera on too, don't worry, I'm recording you as well. So it's fine. Everything gets submitted into evidence, everything gets reviewed. But we have a lot more authority when it comes to those things. So when your friends come in the car and they bring in a small amount of weed or anything that you don't approve of, you should tell them to leave. You should say, I can't have you in the car at that. Because if you're the driver of your car and your buddy has brought something in illegal, whether it be alcohol under the age of 21, some sort of drug or paraphernalia, you as the driver will be charged along with them if they take responsibility. If no one takes responsibility, we charge the driver. So you have to keep in mind, you now hold the keys to the kingdom. Don't let them in if you suspect something, and we have the right to pull you out. A lot of times they'll say, you don't have the legal right. No, we do, because you're driving on a public road, so we can do it. Big thing when it comes to, unfortunately, marijuana now, it's becoming a lot more socially acceptable nationwide. It's been legalized in several states. The big problem we see is DUIs for drug use, primarily marijuana. I'm one of the few officers who's been specially certified by the state to look for impaired driving in what's called advanced roadside interdiction driving enforcement. So I can study a person at the scene when I take them out of the car, and I just had one maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Guy was high driving through Waveney Park with children, right? Really smart. And pull him out, and he passed the alcohol tests, which are a lot easier to administer, and then I switched to the drug-impaired tests, and he failed those. So he was arrested based on that. And, he swore up and down that he did not do drugs. He was convincing. I really almost doubted myself, and man, I must not be good at this anymore. So we come back, and he takes a drug test, and he came back positive for, amongst other things, cannabis, which is marijuana, but also methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin. So I was pretty much spot on. So we look for that now. And we always tell people, don't get in the car with someone, especially in this day and age with Uber and every other option you have out there. It's the easiest it's been to avoid it. One of the biggest things I go to in the town of New Canaan is car accidents. And the biggest, number one kind is a fender bender, rear-ending the car in front. Who's at fault if someone gets rear-ended? The person who bumped the rear bumper, the person behind, is at fault. It's prima facie. There is no such thing as a stop short law in the state of Connecticut. The guy could be in front of you and just slam on the brakes hard as possible. You got 10 witnesses, including a police officer that witnessed it. And you hit the rear bumper of him. You crashed into the back of his car after he aggressively slammed on the brakes. You're still at fault. There is no stop short law in Connecticut. You have to stay at safe and reasonable distance from the car in front of you at all times. This protects you as well, though, because any car driving behind you that hits you, automatically we're going to cite them for being at fault. So keep in mind, just stay a safe distance back. It's very easy to watch the other car with no working brake lights all of a sudden close in on you, and all of a sudden you tap them, and you're the one we have to write the ticket to. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to touch on was kids with seatbelts. Anyone driving a car, 16 or 17 years old, all passengers have to be seatbelted at all times. But for parents here tonight with young kids at home, I also like to point out that anyone under the age of 7 years old or less than 70 pounds must be in a safety seat at all times. So, simple rule, 7 or 70. If the kid is under one of those two, you have to have them in a safety seat, in the back seat. We can install them for free at the police department. Just call us and make an appointment. If we catch you with a child in the car without a safety seat, you'll be given a citation, a ticket, with a special provision marked on it. You're going to lose your license as the parent, and you're going to have to go to a special safe driving school to get your license back. This is as the parent now. So keep in mind that that's how serious the state of Connecticut takes driving with children in the car. For all the kids who are about to get their license in the next year or so, you're going to probably notice that there's things driving around at 2:30 in the afternoon every day. Big yellow things. What are they? What? Yeah. If you see the yellow lights, what should you do? Speed up and try to pass the bus or start slowing down? Okay. I think I've issued 5 or 6 passing a stop school bus tickets in the last month and a half alone. It's always in the first month of school where it's high. It's a $475 fine, the first offense. The second offense, there are very few offenses that follow you for the rest of your life besides DUI when it comes to driving. One of them is passing a stop school bus. Every other offense gets removed from your record after 3 years. It might still affect your insurance, but we don't keep it on your criminal record for driving offenses anymore. It gets expunged. The exception of DUI, evading, reckless driving, which are all arrestable offenses, passing a stopped school bus is the one that stays. First offense, $475. Let's say the school bus has its stop sign on in the circle of Saks, and you drive around the circle, and you pass the bus with the sign, and you're like, I didn't even notice it. We're still going to write you the ticket. The stop sign applies everywhere and anywhere. Even me as a police officer cannot legally pass a school bus with the stop sign out, no matter what the emergency call I'm going to with lights and sirens. I have to, by law, stop and wait for that bus stop sign to go. And usually the bus drivers kind of figure it out, and they try to move as quickly as possible and let me keep going. But I have to wait. So if I have to wait, trust me, you guys have to wait too. And I write a lot of them. And the second offense for the rest of your life after you get the first is a misdemeanor arrest. We're going to bring you in. You'll be fingerprinted, photographed, and given a court date just like any other offense. So, and that stays with you forever. One of the big things in the state of Connecticut that I want all the teenagers here to know is all driving offenses are adult crimes. There is only a few, almost everything is juvenile for anyone under the age of 18. They changed it around 10 years ago. They had 16 and 17-year-old could be an adult in certain situations, and then the state just said, we're going to go back to 18. If you're under the age of 18, with the exception of a very violent crime like murder, sexual assault, first degree, and arson, you're going to be charged as a juvenile. It's going to go to family court. It's going to be sealed. It's going to be removed from your record when you turn 18. The exception besides those 3 serious violent offenses is every driving offense in Connecticut. You're an adult. You get pulled over at 16 years old for DUI, we bring you in as an adult. We process you as an adult. If we catch you with a pound of drugs at the age of 16, we're going to treat you as a juvenile. We're going to bring you into the office, sit you down, give you some cookies, call your parents, give you a court date, be very nice. As an adult, 16 years old, for driving offenses, though, you are going to go into the holding cell with the other adults. So that's one thing to remember. That applies to everyone the moment you turn 16 and you have a license. So passenger restrictions, does everybody understand that? Okay, so when you're 16 years old, first 6 months, really simple. You can't have anyone in the car except an immediate family member who's licensed to drive, like a parent. After 16 years old and 6 months, or 6 months after you've gotten your license, you can have immediate family in the car, brother, sister, parents, all that. Anyone else in the car is a violation of passenger restrictions. We will issue the ticket and we will tow the car because we can't let you now drive that same person out of there that we saw you with. So we have to tow. There are no cell phone use whatsoever in the state of Connecticut for a 16 or 17-year-old. Hands-free or holding the phone. If you're running late, parents, don't call them and say, where are you? Don't worry, you're on the Bluetooth, right? It doesn't matter. 16 to 17-year-olds cannot use the phone under any circumstance besides calling 911 while driving, even if it's hands-free. So if you drive by us and we see your mouth moving and there's no one in the car, we might stop and talk to you and see what's going on. Oh, I'm on Bluetooth with my parents. Okay, well, you were in violation then. So they don't want distractions. They want you to be completely focused on the road because this is when you're at your most inexperienced of your driving life. So I always tell people when you have to make that call, make it before you get in the car to leave school to go home. Hey, I'll be home in 10 minutes. Call first. Don't call when you're on the road. It's the simplest way to avoid it. Okay, curfew, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the state of Connecticut. We pull you over at 11:05. I'm sorry, but it's again, it's a violation. You'll be given a ticket. And you can lose your license for up to 6 months. There are a few exceptions. Employment, you're a waiter in town. It may be To Kill a Mockingbird, and you're leaving work at 11:30, and you've got your uniform on. We can We'll investigate it a little bit. We might call them up and make sure, but that's fine, as long as you're headed home. If it's 2 in the morning and the restaurant closed at 11, and you're now saying you're driving home, like, it doesn't work anymore. So you have a small window, but you have to use it appropriately. School function, like tonight, like prom, going home, that's fine. Medical necessity, you're on your way to the hospital. We stop you, say there's a serious cut or bleed. Yep, but we're going to follow you there and make sure you're really going there. So again, don't just say these things, because we do investigate. But other than that, it's 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. for anyone who's for their first year or up until their 18th birthday. At that point, you are treated as an adult. Okay, so we touched on the 40 hours behind the wheel. One of the big things I always like to point out to people is don't leave your keys in the car. We just had another stolen car this week. So we've been getting a lot of stolen cars. I always tell everyone that your neighbor's not going to probably break into you in your house or your car in this town. But the guy from Bridgeport, Waterbury, they know New Canaan's a nice town, Norwalk, and they come over and they've been committing a lot of offenses. We just caught 2 people who burglarized 5 houses over the last 2 months. So, and they were up by Milford, coming down all the time to burglarize the houses until we found them. So, and we just had a stolen car again, and we've had probably 8 or 9 stolen cars this year. So it's happening. So don't leave. In every single case, the keys were left in the car. They're not hot wiring. It's not like the movies. Criminals really aren't that smart. So don't give them too much credit. And just bring the keys in the house. One of the big things I've always noticed is that when people get stopped, they don't know where they are. This kind of goes to all age groups now, I've noticed. And we get so focused on being like, just drones to the GPS telling us where to go. We don't even know what road we're on. This is really dangerous, I've noticed, for teenage drivers. So the big thing I recommend that all parents do is when you're driving with the kid, so I'm a field trainer. Whenever someone comes out of the academy, I ride with them for 10 weeks and evaluate them every day and grade them and teach them the rules of the road. The number one thing they all complain about is how hard it is to learn all the streets. And they have to learn every street by heart without using a GPS to pass our field training program. So one of the simple things I do when we're driving around, I tell all parents to do this, is as soon as you're driving down, let's say, everybody here know Ponus Ridge Road? Okay, you're driving down Ponus Ridge Road. You're driving north, you just passed West School, and all of a sudden you say, what road did we just pass on the right-hand side? They just passed it. They should be able to read a street sign pretty easily. Most of my recruits, police officers that I'm training, can't do it until they start to really pay attention and start to take notice of the road. And when you take notice of a simple thing like a street sign, you start to notice a lot more detail out there. If the kid's having a little bit of trouble with it, I always say start off small. Every mailbox is kind of unique and different. What color was the mailbox on the left-hand side we just passed 10 seconds ago? What color was the one on the right? Just randomly shout them out. It was blue. It was red. Once they're good on that, switch to street signs. What street did we just pass? Okay. Oh, it was Jelliff Mill. Very good. What's the next one? So it was Adams Lane. Okay, good. So you're paying attention. That's critical, because if you don't pay attention to those little things, you're going to miss the guy who's on his phone about to cut out in traffic in front of you. And even though you're in the right here, do you still want to get in the accident, even if you're in the right? I'm sure we all like to avoid that. Number one driving dangerous day. Snow, hurricane, had Sandy, right? Rain. Wet leaves, what does everyone think it is? Sunny. That's our number one accident day by far. It's our number 1, our number 2, and number 3. The most dangerous time, though, is after a light rainstorm, after a few days of dry sun, and then just a little light sprinkle on the road. All that oil that's dripping out of the cars as they drive has now just risen to the surface. If your tires aren't that good, you have to hit the brakes hard. That's when we see all the fishtailing and the skid marks in the road, and that's when we see all of our accidents happen. You just literally follow the skid marks. You can retrace the path of the car. Skid marks don't come from the rubber of your tires, okay? So what do the skid marks come from? When you see skid marks in the road, you notice these 2 big lines just went right off into the grass, and you're like, whoa, something happened here. They're not from the rubber of the tire of the car. They're from the oil in the road. When the guy hit the brakes, he's causing friction to heat up the road really high. That oil rises to the surface and makes a nice clean path. The car literally just traced the line for the officer to see where it went off the road. So it's all from the road. There's a lot of oil in that road, a lot. And it comes to the surface because oil is lighter than water the moment it rains. And everyone thinks after the rain stops and it's sunny out, oh, I can now speed up again. That's the most dangerous time of the day, without question. That's when almost all of our accidents happen. We get very few on snowstorms. So, let's see here. The number one thing I definitely wanted to leave across to all the teenagers here, and this was touched on, is that the number one cause of death in the state of Connecticut for 15 to 19-year-olds is car crashes. So it's serious and it's real. I've had several fatalities in my years here in town. If you include the Merritt Parkway, the New Canaan section, I've had even more. It's very hard to give a death notification to a parent, and you guys don't want to do that. Always wear your seatbelts. Remember that there's the passenger restriction rules. Always remember to follow the speed limit lines. We can trace how fast the car was going based on the length of the skid marks. So we know exactly how fast the car was going. So keep all that in mind. It's the number one cause in this state, unfortunately, and it's something we try to cut down on. That's one of the reasons why we do our traffic enforcement. Every year in September, we go out and we try to do around the school zones, distracted driving. And sure enough, this year I got several teenagers and even a few parents going to pick up their kids who were all on their phones. And every one of them got a ticket. So first month of school, I think I had around 25 cell phone tickets. And every one of them was a New Canaan resident, and every one of them was either a teenager or a parent going to pick up a teenager. So it's really bad, and that's what's causing all these tragic accidents. So just keep that in mind, guys, and be careful. All right, I think that's everything I covered. All right, thank you. One thing, I did bring a bunch of rules to the road. I brought on 10 copies. These are the laws for 16, 17-year-olds. A nice little neat guide from the DMV I printed out. I'll leave them over here. You guys can take them with you. I should say one per family. So that way you just know when you get home, like what's the rule for passengers and all that stuff. It'll tell you right here. Anybody have any questions?
We heard that 16 and 17-year-olds can't use the radio either.
No, they can.
Okay,
Yeah, distracted driving can cover a lot of other stuff, such as if they use the radio and we have someone say, yeah, they used the radio and they swerved off into the lane, and then they're like, hey, I'm like, just saw you swerve, over the lines. What was the deal? Oh, I was looking at the radio. Well, that's distracted driving because you were looking down. But as long as you are trying to do it safely, it's not against the law. If it causes something, it can be against the law. Yep. Yes, there is no grace period for cell phone. You would just get a cell phone ticket. Distracted driving would be if, say, you veered into traffic past the red light while on your phone. So you were distracted by your phone, you veered into traffic. So we'd cite you for the cell phone, and then on top of that, the distracted driving as well. Yeah, the only exception for the phone while driving for everyone is if it's adults, it's hands-free. And if it's if you have to actually hold the phone in your hand, it's allowed for 911 only. Anyone else? Yep.
Maybe for both of you, because the kids are licensed, I'm a new licensed driver, and it is very unsettling to send them out, like I'm 95. Do you have any recommendations after, just to kind of ease into that instead of just saying like, okay, you're licensed, go anywhere? Do you have any guidelines for that?
Well, certainly with us, with our course that we do, we bring the kids, we do a lane change lesson, which is very powerful information for both the Merritt, never mind downtown driving the Canaan lane changes, but getting on and off the Merritt and getting on and off 95. That lane change lesson is very important. However, gauging the speed of other vehicles and the gap that you need, and maybe another car merging from the middle lane over to the right lane, and that whole big picture, which I love the way you did, I'm going to use it in my class, is paying attention to the road signs. That's what driving's about, is checking all that out, and they don't have that yet because they're new, to your point. So what I encourage people to do, take exit 16 off 95, or where the new mall is going to be. You guys will be hanging out there maybe. It's nuts to get off there and merge back on. So I would do it as you driving, and they're a passenger, and look, pay attention to everything. Boom, 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 boom. There's probably 12 things going on that they have to pay attention to, that if they are driving, they're focused on one thing, it's getting to that space. So little by little by little. And then I like the connector, Route 7 connector from the DMV. If you go up Grist Mill and hop on there, you have a nice, not crazy area. It's multi-lane. You can hop off to the Merritt, merge on there. It's an awkward little merge. It doesn't have a stop sign, which is good. It's a yield. Or you could get off and go right into Soho, or you could go north 95, south 95, or you could bail and get back over to Broad River on 123. We do lessons with students after they have their license on 95, but during the course of a teen 8-hour, we do not bring them on 95 for that very reason. They don't have the skill yet.
What are the restrictions for actually proceeding the front person?
They recommend at least 12 years old is the normal age. I think honestly the honest rule is at least over 7 years old, 70 pounds, but they're much more fragile and the airbag is much more aggressive in the front. So at that point, it's kind of your discretion. But they would say, at the least, they say double digits for age. Anything below that, you should keep them in the back seat once they're over 70 pounds or 7 years old and just put them in a seatbelt back there. But it's not against the law from what I remember. It's just more, it's a danger in the front until they're of a certain height where the airbag won't impact them as aggressively. Anyone else? I'm going to leave these by the table, guys. Thank you very much.
All right, good night, everybody.
Yeah, a few years in a row.